Lastly, we have another executive order that President Trump signed relating to independent agencies. This executive order would establish important oversight functions in the Office of Management and Budget and its subsidiary office, OIRA, supervising independent agencies and many of their actions, and also reestablishes the longstanding norm that only the President or the Attorney General can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
Thank you very much, Will. That was the primary purpose of this conference.
President Trump on Tuesday signed an executive order declaring that only the Attorney General or the President, instead of the federal regulators or bureaucrats, can speak for the U.S. when interpreting the meaning of laws carried out by the executive branch. I took this blurb from a Washington Times Post today on February 18th, 2025, 3 hours ago. I wanted to express this and put this out in the world, but really what I wanted to do was kind of break this down for people who are still questioning what the hell this means. So I ran this through ChatGPT with the prompt that says, explain this to me as if I was 10 years old. Imagine you're playing a big game with lots of rules, like a board game or a sport. Normally, there are referees who help explain the rules to make sure everyone plays fair. But sometimes, different referees might explain the rules in different ways, which can be confusing. What President Trump did was make a new rule that says only two people, the President and the Attorney General, who is like the main lawyer for the country, are allowed to decide what the rules mean when the government is following them. That means other people who work in the government can't make their own guesses about what the rules mean. They have to listen to the president or the attorney general. This is to make sure that there's one clear answer instead of a bunch of different ones. Everyone must then follow these rules. However, they must only follow them as the president or the attorney general have designated the meaning of them. If someone else were to interpret that rule in a different way, they would be wrong and therefore unlawful. So then I asked, where in history has this exact type of order happened? Throughout history, many leaders who wanted to control their governments more tightly have made similar moves, limiting who can interpret or enforce laws. Here are a few examples. Adolf Hitler, Germany, 1933 to 1945. When Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, he passed laws like the Enabling Act of 1933 that gave him the power to make and interpret laws without needing approval from the German parliament. This let him and his closest officials decide what laws meant and how they should be enforced. Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union, 1924 to 1953. Stalin controlled the Soviet government by ensuring that only he and a few trusted officials could decide how laws were interpreted. He used this control to silence opponents and maintain absolute control. Benito Mussolini, Italy, 1922 to 1943. The dictator of Italy centralized legal power by making sure only his government could decide what laws meant. This made it easier for him to eliminate political rivals and enforce his rule without question. Francisco Franco, Spain, 1939 to 1975. Franco ruled Spain as a dictator and made sure that only his government could determine how laws were applied. This prevented opposition groups from challenging his rule. Fidel Castro, Cuba, 1959 to 2008. After taking control of Cuba, Castro changed the legal system so that only his government could decide how laws were interpreted. This helped him maintain control over the country for decades. Hugo Chavez, Venezuela, 1999 to 2013. Chavez made legal changes that reduced the power of judges and government agencies, giving himself and his allies more control over how laws were enforced. So why does this matter? When only one person or a small group is allowed to interpret laws, it can lead to a situation where they have too much power. This means they can change laws in their favor, punish opponents unfairly, and make it harder for regular people to challenge bad decisions. So then I asked, if the president made this executive order, what does that mean for the country of America? President Trump's recent executive order centralizes the authority to interpret laws within the executive branch, specifically granting this power solely to the president and the attorney general. This move significantly reduces the interpretive roles of independent federal agencies, such as the Federal Election Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission, by requiring them to submit significant regulations for review by the White House Office of Management and Budget. OMB, and adhere to the legal interpretations of the President and the Attorney General. Historically, similar centralization of legal interpretation power has been observed in regimes where leaders sought to consolidate authority, often leading to diminished checks and balances within the government. For instance, leaders like Adolf Hitler in Germany and Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union implemented measures that centralized legal interpretation and enforcement, effectively eliminating independent oversight and facilitating authoritative rule. If President Trump's executive order sets a precedent, it could lead to a significant shift in the balance of the power within the U.S. government. By concentrating interpretive authority in the hands of the President and the Attorney General, the traditional system of checks and balances may be undermined, potentially allowing for unilateral decision-making without the customary oversight from independent agencies or the legislative and judicial branches. This centralization could pave the way for the executive branch to unilaterally define the scope and application of laws, potentially sidelining other branches of government and eroding democratic norms. Legal experts and constitutional scholars have expressed concerns that such consolidation of power may lead to challenges against the separation of powers doctrine enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. The potential for the executive branch to unilaterally interpret laws raises questions about the future role and independence of federal agencies and the potential for increased politicization of legal interpretations. In summary, while the executive order aims to streamline legal interpretations within an executive branch, setting this as the precedent could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the U.S. government, potentially leading to increased executive authority reminiscent of historical incidences where similar centralizations preceded authoritarian government. Now, I'm going to ask one final question. Please explain this as if I was 10 years old. Imagine your school has rules. Things like when recess is, how long lunch lasts, and whether you can chew gum in class. Normally, different teachers and even the principal help explain these rules and make sure everyone follows them. Now, let's say the principal suddenly decides that only he and one special teacher, let's call them the vice principal, can say what the rules really mean. No other teachers are allowed to explain or decide them anymore. If a teacher thinks the rules should be one way, but the principal says it's another, the teacher has to listen to the principal. This is kind of what President Trump's new rule or executive order does. It says that when it comes to government rules and laws, only the president or the attorney general, basically the government's top lawyer, can say what they mean. That means other government workers, like people who handle voting, the environment, or business laws, can't decide things on their own anymore. They have to follow what the president or the attorney general says. Why does this matter? 1, less oversight. Normally, lots of different people help make sure that rules are fair and correctly followed. But now, only 2 people get to decide what the laws mean. This could be risky because it takes away power from the others who might have different opinions. Number 2, too much power in one place. In history, some leaders have done things like this to get power. When only one person or a small group controls the rules, they can change things in their favor and make it hard for others to question them. Number 3, what comes next? If future presidents follow this rule, they could keep taking more control over how laws work. Over time, this could make it harder for regular people or even parts of the government to say if something is unfair or wrong. The big picture. This decision might change how the U.S. government works. Usually, power is shared so that no one person has too much control. But this new rule makes the president and the attorney general the only ones who can say what the laws really mean. Some people worry that this could lead to a situation where one person has way too much power, which has happened in history before with dictators. If this rule sticks around, it could change how laws are understood and enforced in America for the long run. Did this explanation help?
You choose your side, I'll choose mine. You ready?